Okay. I'd first like to thank everyone who's presented and the CTL. The presentations are really interesting, and thank you for that. I'm Nancy Dalgarno, and I teach in the Bachelor of Health Science program in DBMS and the Masters of Health Professions Education program.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angélique Roy, and I'm a Health Sciences Librarian at the Bracken Health Sciences Library, so it's really great to be here with you today.
We're going to talk about part of a course. It's a Health Sci 383 course. It's called Advanced Research Methodologies in DBMS, in the Bachelor of Health Science. And it was originally developed by Denise and myself, and we have co-taught this course for the last 5 years, since its inception. The course is designed to develop student skills in developing quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods research studies. It's a group-based course where assessments include 4 in-class group mini presentations, online module assignments, 2 peer assessments or feedback fruits, and by the end of the course, the students' research teams or groups submit a final research proposal on their chosen topic.
So we're here today to share a collaboration that has grown really meaningfully through this course for us over the past 4 years since I have become involved. So I first joined the course in the fall of 2022, and my role was straightforward, a single information literacy session. So 1 visit, 1 lesson with very supportive and enthusiastic faculty colleagues. So we're going to share how that sort of evolved into a more integrated approach and how embedding assessment strengthens information literacy instruction.
So as Angélique said, the focus of this presentation is on a library instructor collaboration specific to developing students' skills in using a literature search to write a good research question about a topic of their choice. Students completed an interactive online module to develop this skill. They participated in an interactive in-person 2-hour session led by one of our brilliant health science librarian scientists, Angélique. And then they gave a formal presentation about their literature search, review, and focus research topic. The presentation is assessed by Angélique, Denise, and I, and based on a rubric, and we also provide verbal feedback right after they present, right after their presentation. So this collaboration, it's been a developmental partnership with the 3 of us over the 3 years, and Angélique will explain more about that.
So this information and research literacy session has followed what a lot of my librarian colleagues in the room will know very well is the one-shot model, in which a librarian is invited to deliver a single session focused on supporting students' academic research, typically in relation to an assignment. So our version of this for Health Sci 383 expanded as we identified more opportunities to connect library instruction to the learning goals of the course. The session is tied to 2 course learning outcomes around developing research questions, building search strategies, and critically examining sources. So as Nancy alluded to in this session, students learn frameworks for developing research questions, then move into the mechanics of searching, controlled vocabularies, keywords, Boolean operators, and database selection. And we kind of go through what that actually means. So I do actually break down when we say Boolean and when I say controlled vocabularies, that all gets explained in that 2-hour session. But they also explore discipline-specific databases as well as multidisciplinary databases, moving deliberately away from a reliance on Google, and engage in active learning that's designed to reinforce a central point. Researching and searching is an iterative, nonlinear process. The language you use, the tools you choose, and the decisions you make along the way all matter. The session also expanded to include documenting research processes for transparency and reproducibility, as well as the complexities of scholarly publishing, retractions, publication bias, preprints, and deceptive publishing practices. And of course, more recently, AI's role in the research process has entered the conversation. So throughout, our content aligns with the Association of College and Research Libraries Framework for Information Literacy, which positions students as active and responsible participants in the research process. And as Nancy said, perhaps the most significant shift in our collaboration has been a move toward shared responsibility for assessment within one of these course modules. So it did emerge naturally from a relationship that has grown over time, grounded in learning from each other's expertise and a shared commitment to student learning. So the presentations were the course's first formal assessment worth 20% of the student's final grade, and it addressed interconnected stages of the research process, from developing a research question, conducting database searches, and analyzing and synthesizing the literature. So I was able to participate not simply as an observer, but as part of the feedback process for the components I had introduced in an earlier session. The presentations required students to explain and justify their methodological decisions and the alignment between their research questions and their search approaches. After each presentation, I was able to engage with them immediately. The feedback I provided was focused and constructive, really reflecting on how they developed their keywords, how did they construct and refine their search queries, were their database selections appropriate for their research questions, how did they evaluate what they found, and are there other resources that I could recommend to them to further advance their research. So this kind of immediate feedback is often very difficult to incorporate into a standalone library session. Sometimes our one-shots are 20 minutes once a year. That's all we get. Upwards of 50. I was fortunate to have 2 hours. But being present in the room at that time alongside Nancy and Denise, who have developing and teaching this course for 5 years, it meant that the feedback was timely, it was specific, and it was connected to the broader course expectations and built upon what was already being taught rather than being done in isolation. And this assessment made library instruction a visible and accountable part of the student learning experience rather than an add-on. Assessment doesn't have to be the exclusive domain of fully embedded collaboration, so where we are involved in the course at every stage throughout the year. Even in one-shot sessions, brief graded activities can signal that research skills are expected to be developed and demonstrated, not simply introduced once and then forgotten. So these assessments also create a valuable feedback loop for me as I can help refine that instruction over time. Okay, so what did we discover? Students were able to clearly articulate their research processes. It was very impressive. I felt very, very inspired after. It was not solely just what they used, but why and how they made their decisions and how that process evolved as they worked together in their groups. That ability to explain and justify those methodological choices is exactly what our course learning objective number 5 asks of them. So we did observe a more deliberate and refined search strategies, extensive and appropriate use of keywords, and effective ands and or combinations to connect their core concepts, and it really adhering to the mechanics of the databases chosen. The assessment itself functioned as a learning moment, because I always learned with them. And it became part of this this feedback process. So embedding assessment into library instruction really does change the status in a course. When Nancy and Denise determined that library-taught skills should be assessed, it signaled to students that research literacy is a core academic responsibility and not a checkbox. Even in that one shot, like I said, a low-stakes graded component can have a far greater impact than instruction without a connection or accountability. It works because of our complementary expertise. The faculty contribute their disciplinary expertise, while the librarian helps navigate the scholarly communications landscape. And together this creates something that none of us could do on our own. Taken as a whole, everyone is learning in the classroom, not just us. And third, this is transferable. While our content is health sciences, it can apply across principles, across disciplines and course levels. So our next steps, while the information sciences literature has extensively explored the one-shot instruction and how it works, as well as faculty-librarian collaboration, there's still little or limited evidence about what students retain and apply. So in an age where, our students are going to TikTok, other social media, and AI for their information seeking, it's important for us to embed this assessment to be able to create conditions to measure learning rather than assuming it's happening. We're interested in gathering student self-reflections before and after library instruction, as well as looking at those QSET comments to assess if there's any changes in confidence and or competency. And we are hoping to use that feedback we gathered this fall as sort of a starting point as we continue. And we're also planning to publish our experience so that other collaborations can build on what we're learning. And we're sure there is a lot of people in this room doing very, very similar work, and we'd love to hear about it. So ultimately, this is a continuous cycle of assessing, adapting, and applying, supported through our ongoing conversation and collaboration. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. It's a great course, and it's amazing to learn that these courses exist. I'm in DBMS, and I never knew. This is such an amazing opportunity for our students. I have a question which you can immediately throw back at us when we've presented, but it's something that's kind of an ongoing nagging, and it's about the self-reflections. Have you thought of any adequate ways of actually measuring and grading and assessing self-reflections? Because it's something that we struggle with.
We have a rubric for that, and if you see me after, I can share that. Okay.
I just have a comment. I'm an undergraduate student, and I had the pleasure of taking this class, and I really appreciated having both the faculty and librarian feedback, and having that prompt feedback was something that I really valued as a student. And I think I took a lot away from this class, in terms of search strategies, a lot of things that I've applied into my other classes. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your presentation. I have the feeling that this type of partnership and the learning, the students may not always know right away how valuable it is. And so I'm curious about your research, or if the publication that you're working on, if you've considered doing a postgraduate, follow-up of if what they've learned in your course has served them in whatever direction they take, just having that really grounded, informed, even knowing where to access library services or supports.
That would be wonderful. What I'd love to do is, because I'm involved in the core health sciences research methodology classes that go through the Bachelor of Health Sciences, we've talked, and I said, what if we measure that year over year, and then we, measure that beyond. So it's definitely something that's maybe in our minds, but right now, yeah. But it will be something that we'd have to work through. But I'd love to actually see, because, I have heard some very polite feedback from some students who, just sort of mentioned that they might see the library as, they're not making the connection between the librarian as, a resource, the resources we have at the library, the space of the library. So I think it'll be an interesting challenge to try to measure what they do take away. Anecdotally, I can speak to it. The feedback is really, really helpful, but I'd love to work on something like that.